to allow me to be in this panel. I am a foreign. I should be yesterday, but I promise that I won't take 5 minutes to present it, just to highlight some results of this research project that try to understand the private enforcement here in Brazil, how to recovery worms of minority investors when we have a false or misleading information. So if we take a look to our law on the books, go into the international way to understand just the law, we can just notice here that we have courts and arbitration involved. We have individual and collective lawsuits in our law, and also in some levels of corporate governance in the stock market, it is not voluntary but mandatory to use the arbitration as an instrument. But we also think about compensation in the public enforcement mechanisms using the private prosecutor's office, and also CVM can file a lawsuit trying to recover investors' damages. So we have also the public side, but I won't talk about this, but settlement and consent decree and public interest civil lawsuit can maybe recovery investors' damage. Well, until last year, I think we have just one case in Brazil, successful one lawsuit that, one case that investors were recovery. It was a very simple case. It's not in the private enforcement side, but in the public side, using termo de compromisso, using a settlement. It was a very simple case and not replicable one, because the false information was given in the 12, it was midday, and then 1 hour and a half they corrected the information, and then the CVM just settled with the company trying to pay this 1 hour and a half trading investors. Okay, well, we have other cases. I won't go into these ones, but the fact is we have cases, lawsuits, individual, collective, in the private enforcement, using private enforcement mechanism, using public enforcement mechanism, but no one was able to, I don't know if it's in English, but put money in the pocket of the investors, okay? But it was until last year, something happened, and it was not changing the law, it's not changing in our enforcement system, it's just a mediatic case like Petrobras. Something happened in Petrobras, corruption, and nowadays Petrobras is a case to study in the future, because I think maybe because something happened in the US market. We have there a class action, and also Petrobras settled with a lot of individual issuers. We also have litigation in Argentina and Europe. And nowadays we have 47 individual lawsuits. We have 2 arbitration, one with 30 institutional foreign investors, and another one that last week, I think it was in the news, with individuals. And we also, today it is in the news, in the first page, that CVM just start a sanctioning proceeding against 40 members of Petrobras. So the whole directors and whole office in 5-7 years is now having this prosecution. And we also have this inquérito civil público that I don't know exactly what it means, but it is in the file of Petrobras. So I just want to try to show. I was with this presentation yesterday in a OECD roundtable trying to, my message was, it is not easy to assess the enforcement, and it's very changeable. It's not a picture like a norm, a substantial norm that I can say we have it and we have not. It is more changeable, and how to assess it in 10 years, it is completely different from what I said last year. Probably Petrobras is a case that will say us how our private enforcement will work, and how private enforcement, who will do it, and where should we bet to to improve our system. Private mechanisms, public mechanisms. The market also always tells us that CVM need to do something, the public prosecutor need to do something, but now we can have it thinking about arbitration. And I think it's very challenging because arbitration nowadays with Petrobras case shows us that it's a very selective investor protection. Because for example, in 2 cases, the judge, the court, just said, no, you need to go to arbitration, but the investor was just asking for a little amount of warm. And it is too expensive to go to arbitration. What happened with these guys? Just sit and cry, because enforcement systems do not work for these small investors, just to the big ones. So we have to think about costs of arbitration, maybe alternative collective arbitration, and also something that is very challenging for us is secrecy. We don't know anything about arbitration because we're not allowed to access or to know which one are happening in the coming arbitration chamber in the Securities Exchange. And I think we'll lose to understand our system. If we continue with the secrecy, probably in 10 years, we won't know what's happening in our system, what's the thesis. It is a problem, and the problem is that to change the secrecy, we need to have the vote of, I think, 2/3 of the companies that are listed in this. So we need to convince these people that we need to change our system. So self-regulation is not always an interesting way to address interesting or important interests in Brazil. Well, that's it. That's my point. We need to understand enforcement. It is very changeable, or maybe second best solution in settlements, but we're betting in the public enforcement instruments, or should we bet in arbitration as a way to go out of the courts, or should we say, no, we're having to go to the courts. We need to teach our judge how the market works. We need to do this work, because otherwise we'll have always a second best solution. And I think we'll continue with this research, trying to understand our institutional design, trying to understand what we can watch in the other systems. But I think we have a problem that is our problem, and we have to fix it, or we have to go forward. I don't know how and why, but Petrobras case and other case that is pushing from the US enforcement system and are asking us to do something. And unfortunately, yesterday, because we didn't have a quorum at Congresso Nacional, just our medida provisória that was that should be improve our public enforcement, just probably will be nothing, and then we have to think how to create a private enforcement. That's it. 5 minutes. Thank you very much.